Venus-Uranus is a very exciting combination. And this is because Venus has to do with our love life, but also our social connections in general. And Uranus has to do with excitement and electricity and freedom and liberation. Therefore, when we have Venus and Uranus in hard aspects combinations within our birth chart, it can manifest as us having a very electric and exciting love life in general. Venus-Uranus is the combination of diversity in love. And it's also the combination of speed in love. Uranus and Uranian people in general tend to do things very quickly. So whereas Venus-Pluto people fall deeply, madly in love because of a sense of being overwhelmed by this primal desire to be loved, Venus-Uranus people, on the other hand, they quickly enter relationships because they are excited and deeply stimulated by the idea of meeting new people. However, when we have Venus and Uranus in hard aspects combination within our birth chart, it can manifest as just that, a never-ending curiosity about being in a love relationship. But it may not necessarily land in the deepest, most committed, most long-lasting place for us, because another thing about Venus-Uranus people is that they tend to get bored quickly. And when we have Venus-Uranus in hard aspects combination, one of the places where we tend to get bored is in our love life. And we need excitement and diversity and change and new experiences to keep us intellectually stimulated as well as emotionally stimulated by the people who we are calling our partners. A person with Venus-Uranus oftentimes find themselves from one relationship to another relationship, and they may never actually take the time necessary to be single or to simply be by themselves. Because whereas they don't have the same primal, overwhelming desire to be in love as a Venus-Pluto person has, they still have a nervous tension or a nervous itch surrounding their love life that causes them to always want to experience love's fulfillment. However, when they experience love's fulfillment, they can sometimes find themselves being in the joy and the excitement of that for a day, 2 days, a week, maybe a month. But after that, they find themselves starting to feel anxious once more because they feel as if they need to get out of it to find something else more stimulating. When we have Venus-Uranus and hard aspect combination within our chart, we want to be stimulated. And the best way for us to stay in one relationship for a long time is to be in a relationship with somebody who is fun, somebody who is also exciting, and somebody who also desires the same depth and level of stimulation and adventure that we desire. Because otherwise, in the absence of that, the Venus-Uranus person, once they find themselves getting bored with their lover, they can sometimes descend into slowly picking their lover apart for things that were always present within that lover to begin with. So sometimes the Venus-Uranus person, as a means of justifying for themselves the reason why they're no longer attracted to the person who they're attracted to, they can sometimes say, this person's mole is under their right eye, and I would have preferred if the mole was under their left eye. This person's bottom lip is substantially smaller than their top lip. This person's right arm is a little bit longer than their left arm. And for all of these reasons, I find myself no longer wanting to be in an intimate relationship with this person. Because sometimes when we have Venus-Uranus, we can be very peculiar and very nitpicky as well as far as our love relationships are concerned, and we look for any reason for us to bolt whenever we feel like it's time to leave and find the other person whose heart we will descend upon. When we have Venus-Uranus within our birth chart, we really have to be mindful about how we're showing up in terms of intimate and relational spaces, and we really have to be mindful of the fact that more often than not, the problem in the relationship tends to be us, because we feel this sense of anxiety in love, and we feel the sense of nervousness in love, and we feel like the love that we have isn't necessarily the love that we want to stick with. And so sometimes when the person has Venus-Uranus, they constantly find themselves moving from one lover to the next to try to find the person who will fit this very specific and this very peculiar love groove that they have. And unfortunately, they never can fully fulfill that love impulse within themselves. Because, once again, the reality is that when we have Venus-Uranus, it's completely okay to know that sometimes we are the thing that keeps on exploding our relationships apart, because the urge within the heart of the Venus-Uranus person is an urge towards freedom in love. Now, on a far more positive note, one of the things that I love about Venus-Uranus is that Venus-Uranus is about loving and appreciating weirdness, and loving and appreciating all the weird ways that people show up or manifest within our lives. And so one of the most non-discriminative combinations that we have, astrologically speaking, is the combination of Venus-Uranus. Because the Venus-Uranus person has the ability to celebrate everything that is weird and different about everybody who they find themselves interacting with. And very often when a person has Venus, Uranus, and hard aspects combination within their charts, they find themselves having a circle of friends where the only common denominator in that circle is the Venus-Uranus person. Because under normal circumstances, none of those people who they call their friends would naturally be in friendships with each other, because they come from such distinctly different walks of life. Therefore, Venus-Uranus has the ability to be the great equalizer when it comes to relationships and also when it comes to friendships. Because if you have a person in your life who's a Venus-Uranus person, you'll more than likely meet many interesting people who your life circumstances would never otherwise cause you to meet based on your own specific interests within this lifetime. Surprisingly, hard aspects combinations of Venus and Uranus oftentimes show up within the charts of people who are artistic entrepreneurs. And I guess it's really not that surprising at all, because Venus has to do with art and beauty, and Uranus has to do with freedom. Therefore, if a person has Venus-Uranus within their chart, they want artistic freedom and they want the ability to freely create the art that they desire to create within this lifetime. Therefore, Venus and Uranus is the combination of the freelance artist, or for the person who is making a living for themselves within this lifetime through doing artistic work. Venus-Uranus is also the combination that represents the love of astrology. And this is because Venus has to do with love, and Uranus, from a modern astrological perspective, is the planet that has to do with astrology. Venus and Uranus is a combination for loving weird knowledge. And there's nothing quite as weird as astrology as far as knowledge is concerned. So if you're somebody with Venus-Uranus within your birth chart and you have a burning love of astrology, this is probably the reason why.